In 2018, the water level of the Sea of Galilee reached the most dangerous point in history. Israel understood that they were facing the risk of exhausting the only source of life that nourished an entire civilization in the desert. And that was when Israel decided to do something no one had ever dared to do before. Dozens of miles away from the Sea of Galilee, they built gigantic pipelines, installed powerful pumps, and spent hundreds of millions of dollars to pump salt water directly from the Mediterranean and push it uphill to save the freshwater lake that was dying. This project defied logic, defied gravity, and went against everything people had been taught in school. What makes a small nation like Israel able to do something seemingly crazy, while the United States, the world's #1 superpower, still struggles every day with the water crisis in California and the Colorado River? The truth is, in a place where every drop of water is as precious as gold, every decision has its own logic. If you look at the map of Israel, the Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Kinneret, looks like a large sparkling mirror in the north of the country. But this mirror does not only reflect the sky, it reflects the fate of an entire nation. Although it is called the Sea of Galilee, the name is somewhat misleading. The water here is fresh water, and the lake is quite large, a circumference of about 53 kilometers, a length of about 21 kilometers, and a width of about 13 kilometers. Its importance is far greater. Without Kinneret, Israel might not have the shape it has today. The favorable climate, flat terrain, fertile soil, and abundant water by local standards made the area perfect for living. The rivers flowing into the lake and the plains nearby have provided food and jobs for people throughout history. But by the 20th century, everything changed. Israel turned Kinneret into the center of the national water system and made the flow reach places it had never been before, deep into the desert. According to the Israel Central Bureau of Statistics, between the 1950s and 1970s, Israel's population skyrocketed from 1.4 million to 2.5 million people. Newcomers arrived continuously, children were born, and the nation was developing before everyone's eyes. The population grew, and cities expanded southward, where there was a complete lack of fresh water. A groundbreaking plan was born, to build the national water carrier system and make water flow through pipelines like a man-made river. This became the largest, most ambitious, and most expensive construction project in the country's history. At that time, Israel was still a poor country, and building the national water carrier became a project of national significance. At its peak, for every 14 able-bodied people, one person was directly involved in digging trenches, welding pipes, pouring concrete, and assembling the system. The project consumed about 5% of the national GDP, an enormous figure both then and now, and required countless unprecedented engineering solutions. Millions of cubic feet of rock were excavated and removed, cliff walls were carved, and concrete was poured like a river. In the end, the water carrier system stretched about 80 miles. Each hour, it could transfer up to 19 million gallons of water, equivalent to about 450 million gallons per day. The system was not just pipes. It also included open channels, tunnels, reservoirs, and massive pumping stations. Water entered a suction pipe deep under the lake, then moved into a shoreline reservoir, and from there reached a pumping station that pushed it all the way to the Negev Desert, home to 630,000 people. Lake Kinneret alone became a national artery, supplying about 105 billion gallons of water per year, nearly half of Israel's total consumption at the time. Thanks to the lake, Israel not only survived but thrived. But like a heart, it also has its limits. By the early 2000s, the situation had begun to deteriorate. A series of droughts dragged the water level below the safety threshold, first in 2000, 2002, then 2008 to 2011, and again in 2016, 2018. The lake was no longer replenished adequately in the winter, while in the summer, the pumping stations operated at full capacity, causing the lake to visibly shrink. Sometimes the water level dropped by up to 4 centimeters per day. In 2018, drought caused a shortage of about 2.5 billion millicuries of water, equivalent to 1 million Olympic swimming pools. The lake level approached the red line, where extracting water would destroy the ecosystem. As the water level decreased, salinity increased because there was no fresh inflow. This allowed blue-green algae to thrive, making the water unusable for drinking or agriculture. The lakebed emerged as small islands, an extremely alarming sign. Even if Israel stopped pumping water entirely, only consecutive winters with heavy rainfall could save the lake, something that almost never happens. A strange situation emerged. Israel used less water from the lake thanks to desalinated water, but the lake kept shrinking. Besides natural factors, changes in the Jordan River's flow were heavily influenced by political context and regional conflicts. Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan all have a history of disputes with Israel over water rights, leading to the construction of dams, reservoirs, and water systems upstream to serve domestic needs. The lake continued to decline, and the press described it as Kinneret on the verge of collapse. But when every solution failed, Israel looked not beneath its feet, but to the Mediterranean Sea, an infinite source of water. Of course, seawater could not be poured directly into a freshwater lake, but Israel chose a smarter path: use desalinated seawater, then pump it back into the lake. For the first time in history, the flow of the national water carrier reversed from south to north. From the desalination plants on the Mediterranean coast at Hadera and Sorek, water is pumped more than 200 meters uphill through new pumping stations along the Beit Shean Valley before being discharged into Lake Kinneret in the north. The project began in 2018, entered technical operation in 2022, cost about 900 million shekels, roughly 269 million USD, and can pump billions of liters of water each season. However, it will not be until 2025 that Israel officially begins pumping desalinated water back into Lake Kinneret. Modern desalination technology works mainly on RO, reverse osmosis, in which seawater is forced through membranes with pore sizes of only about 0.1 to 0.5 nanometers, small enough to retain more than 99% of salt, bacteria, and impurities. Today, Israel and Saudi Arabia are the two world leaders in large-scale RO technology. Israel produces more than 600 million millicuries of desalinated water each year, while Saudi Arabia operates more than 30% of global desalination capacity. After desalination, the water is almost free of minerals, so magnesium and calcium must be added before feeding it into the national water supply system to ensure quality and biological safety. The concentrated brine left after RO desalination is not released directly into the sea, but is transported through underwater pipelines and discharged via offshore diffusers. This method, confirmed by Israel's Ministry of Environmental Protection and the Sorek plant's environmental impact reports, ensures rapid dilution and prevents ecological harm. At this point, you might think high-quality desalinated water is completely safe for the lake. But is that really true? Experts warn that adding large amounts of desalinated water to a natural freshwater lake is an unprecedented experiment with potential long-term risks. Differences in minerals and biological composition may disrupt the lake's microecosystem, alter thermal stratification, reduce deep-water oxygen, and trigger chemical reactions that scientists still cannot fully predict. Therefore, although the system is groundbreaking, scientists believe long-term monitoring and careful evaluation are necessary before confirming the absolute safety of this method. To push water against its natural direction, Israel had to rebuild its entire infrastructure. Old pipes, old pumping stations, old filters, all were designed to push water downward, and now must push it upward. Phase 1 was completed in 2022, with the entire project costing around $270 million USD. They built 29 kilometers of new pipelines through mountain rock and rugged terrain. When completed in 2029, the system will be able to return about 32 billion gallons to the lake, raising the water level by about 70 centimeters per year. Although Israel today is a country associated with many political and ethical controversies on the international stage, in the field of water management alone, it remains an exceptional case worth studying. The first evidence is that the reverse water carrier system is not the only factor that saved the lake. Israel is the best country in the world at water reuse. Since 1985, treated wastewater has been delivered to farms through the water carrier system. This is the only water source that increases as the population grows. By 2015, Israel reused 86% of its wastewater, ranking number 1 in the world, while Spain was second with 17%. Today, Israel reuses nearly 90% of its wastewater, primarily for agriculture, while the United States reuses about 1%. Why does a nation at the forefront of technology rank last in such a vital area as water? If the US reused water as effectively as Israel, the drought crisis in the West would likely have ended long ago. In Israel, the Shafton wastewater treatment plant processes about 124 million gallons per day, generating 140 million millicuries of agricultural irrigation water each year. The water is pumped into aquifers for natural filtration before reaching farmers. In this desert nation, saving water is a philosophy of life. The country reduced water loss from 20% to 7% in 20 years. While the global average is 30%. 60% of households use smart water meters, which help detect leaks immediately. In 2023, 204,000 leaks were identified and fixed. By 2026, all water meters will be smart meters. But pumping water alone is not enough. To survive in an arid land, you must use water more intelligently. Therefore, another wonder of Israel is drip irrigation technology. Water does not flow across the surface, but drips precisely onto the roots, reducing evaporation and almost eliminating waste. Israel pioneered plastic drip emitters that regulate each droplet, allowing the technology to spread worldwide. Even American farmers travel to Israel to learn. Israel learned not to wait for rain, but to create its own water cycle. They made seawater climb mountains, regenerated wastewater, reduced loss, invented drip irrigation, and developed agricultural robots. Recycling wastewater on a national scale allows Israel to produce hundreds of millions of cubic meters of irrigation water each year, saving farmers hundreds of millions of dollars in extraction costs and keeping agriculture profitable even during severe droughts. By cutting water loss down to just 7%, Israel prevents the waste of hundreds of millions of cubic meters of clean water annually, a massive economic value that many countries must compensate for through costly desalination or agricultural imports. Drip irrigation technology and smart water meters not only optimize every drop used within the country, but have also become a billion-dollar export industry, giving Israel long-term economic returns from the very solutions it created to survive. And when a nation treats water as life itself, it can make the desert bloom. If you want to see more stories about infrastructure that changes a nation's destiny, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment so we can discuss together.